What if the history books only gave you half the story? You know World War II, the battles, the bombs, the heroes, but there is a chapter that was buried. A chapter involving trained military pilots who saw something impossible in the sky and were ordered to stay silent forever. It had no wings, no sound. It glowed. It moved faster than anything they had ever seen. When they chased it, it vanished. When they turned, it turned. It seemed to know exactly what they were going to do. Pilots on both sides of the war saw it. American, German, Japanese, all describing the same thing, all told to say nothing. They called them Foo Fighters. And the governments that knew about them chose silence over truth. Stay with us until the end, because we saved something for last. A detail inside a declassified CIA document that proves the cover-up was never about what they knew. It was about something far more cynical. You will not want to miss it. Let us begin. The year is 1944. The war is at its bloodiest. Every night, fighter pilots fly into darkness over enemy territory. These are not civilians looking at the sky nervously. These are combat veterans. Men trained to identify any aircraft in a split second. Men who know the sky better than most people know their own street. So when one of these men says he saw something he could not explain, you take that seriously. It was not one pilot. Reports came from dozens, then hundreds. Americans over Germany. British over the Channel. German Luftwaffe pilots over the Rhine, Japanese over the Pacific, all describing the same thing, a glowing ball of light, silent, impossibly fast. Keeping perfect pace with their aircraft, then gone. The military had no explanation, so they did what powerful institutions do when they have no answer. They said nothing publicly, investigated in secret, and classified everything. The name that stuck was Foo Fighters. Old comic strip soldier slang for a strange, glowing fireball nobody could explain. Both sides of the war were seeing them simultaneously, enemies trying to kill each other, filing identical reports about identical objects. Neither side built them. Neither knew what they were. Every government involved chose silence. That silence lasted decades, and the full truth is still not out. It started on a cold night in November 1944. Lieutenant Edward Schluter was flying a mission over the Rhine Valley in Germany. He was part of the 415th Night Fighter Squadron, elite pilots. They flew in total darkness, hunted enemy aircraft, and did not spook easily. That night Schluter noticed something off his left wing, a cluster of glowing orange and red balls of light, moving fast. Faster than any aircraft he had seen. He pointed them out to radar operator Lieutenant Donald Myers and intelligence officer Lieutenant Fred Ringwald. All three men watched clearly for several minutes. The lights kept perfect pace with the plane, then they simply vanished. Schluter filed a report. His commanders had no explanation. They told him to say nothing publicly. That report became one of the first official military documents on what would become known as Foo Fighters, but it was not the first sighting. Pilots had been whispering about strange lights for months. Nobody wanted to officially report something weird in wartime. You did not want your commander thinking you were losing your mind. So pilots stayed quiet and kept flying. After Schluter's report, others came forward. Reports flooded in across the European theater. The objects glowed red, orange, and white. Some looked basketball-sized. Some were larger. They moved silently with no exhaust and no trail. Maneuvers no known aircraft of that era could perform, and they reacted to the planes around them. When a pilot accelerated, the object accelerated. When he turned, it turned. One pilot from the 415th said it felt like the object was playing with them. Like it knew what they were going to do before they did it. Then the reports came from the other side. Captured German pilots during Allied debriefs mentioned the lights without being asked. Same descriptions, glowing, fast, impossible to catch. Some Germans thought they were Allied weapons. Their commanders had no answer either. Two militaries trying to destroy each other. Both seeing the same thing, neither knowing what it was, both telling their pilots to stop talking. The sightings spread to the Pacific. American and Japanese pilots over the same skies, same objects. Same behavior, same silence from command. By early 1945, the phenomenon had been documented across 3 theaters of war, hundreds of trained military personnel, multiple nations. Consistent descriptions regardless of geography or nationality. You cannot have hundreds of people across multiple countries hallucinate the exact same thing. These pilots were seeing something real. The governments knew it, and the silence continued anyway. There is power in hearing it from the people who were actually there. Lieutenant Donald Myers, the radar operator on Schluter's flight, described the objects as bright, fast, and completely silent. Controlled, not drifting. When Schluter tried to pursue one, it accelerated away almost instantly. Myers said clearly until his final years that what he saw was not any aircraft he had ever encountered or heard of. Captain Alva Riida flew B-29 bombers over Japan in late 1944. On one mission, his crew watched a pinkish sphere approach from the rear at high speed. He braced for impact. It did not hit them. It pulled alongside the bomber and matched its speed exactly. Silent, glowing, flying in formation with a fully loaded B-29 as if escorting it. Then it shot upward and vanished in an instant. Riida never changed his account once. On the German side, Luftwaffe pilot Hans Altner described seeing bright spherical objects on multiple night missions. He thought the first one was a new Allied weapon. He turned toward it and opened fire. The object moved away from his bullets effortlessly, not evasively, effortlessly. Then it circled his aircraft twice and disappeared. After the war, learning that Allied pilots reported the same objects, the Allied weapon theory fell apart for him completely. Sergeant Chester Grusczyewski, a B-29 tail gunner over Japanese territory in 1945, described a glowing object approaching from the rear at extreme speed. He swung his guns toward it. Before he could fire, the object stopped, dead in the sky, stationary, while his aircraft moved at combat speed. It hung there motionless, then shot sideways so fast it left a brief trail of light. He said it was the only thing in his life he genuinely could not explain. Flight officer Russell Forsyth flew a night patrol over the English Channel in late 1944. A warm, white, perfectly round light kept pace off his starboard wing. He tried every maneuver to shake it. Nothing worked. He stopped trying and flew straight. The object matched him exactly. He said the word that kept coming to his mind was deliberate, like it was making choices. When researchers compared these accounts after the war, the picture was striking. Hundreds of reports. Multiple nationalities, different parts of the world, almost identical descriptions every time, spherical or disc-shaped. Glowing, silent, instantaneous acceleration, ability to stop dead. Responsive to aircraft around them, no physical evidence left behind. That consistency is not hallucination. Hallucinations are personal. These men were all seeing the same real phenomenon. Intelligence officer Lieutenant Colonel Harold Watson, who processed many of these reports firsthand, acknowledged in post-war private conversations that Foo Fighter reports had been taken seriously at the highest levels of military intelligence. He said the public dismissal was deliberate, not because the reports were not credible, because there was no explanation that could be given without creating bigger problems than silence. The military could not admit to something it could not explain or control, so they said nothing, and it did not go away. Every mystery demands explanation. Here are the 5 main theories, examined honestly. Theory 1, Nazi secret WAPONS Allied intelligence reached for this first. Nazi Germany was the most technically aggressive military of the era. V1, V2, the Me-262 jet fighter. A specific project called the Feuerball, meaning fireball, surfaced in post-war accounts. Described as a circular unmanned aircraft powered by a turbine engine designed to disrupt Allied systems, capable of following aircraft using a homing mechanism. Compelling. But it collapses under scrutiny. If the Feuerball was operational, it was completely ineffective. Not one Allied aircraft was downed by one. Not one was ever captured or recovered. Allied forces swept every significant German research facility at war's end and found nothing. German scientists brought to America under Operation Paperclip described no such deployed device. And sightings occurred over Germany, the Pacific, Japan, and North Africa simultaneously. Germany had no operational reach across all those theaters at once. The Nazis did not build the Foo Fighters. Theory 2, Allied secret weapons. If Germany did not build them, maybe the Allies did. America was running the most ambitious secret weapons program in history. But here is the fatal logic problem. If the Allies built these objects, why were Allied pilots encountering them as unknown threats? Why were they filing frightened reports? You do not put your own pilots through that confusion with your own weapons. And the geographic spread, the same phenomenon over Germany and the Pacific simultaneously, requires deployment capability no Allied program possessed. The Allies did not build them either. Theory 3, natural phenomena, the most serious scientific conventional explanation. Ball lightning is real and documented. It appears as a luminous sphere, glows in colors from red to white, moves in ways that appear to defy air currents, and can persist for minutes before vanishing. The wartime sky conditions were extraordinary. Massive bombing raids created unusual electrical environments. Ball lightning forming more frequently under those conditions is scientifically plausible. Plasma vortex theory and St. Elmo's fire add further natural explanations for subsets of sightings. But natural phenomena do not follow aircraft. They do not mirror maneuvers or accelerate when pursued. The responsive, intelligent behavior hundreds of pilots described is not something atmospheric physics can produce. Natural phenomena drift and dissipate. They do not make choices. Natural phenomena account for some sightings, not the most significant ones. Theory 4, mass psychological hysteria, the official military position. Combat pilots under extreme stress, sleep-deprived, flying in darkness, could misinterpret ordinary stimuli. And once pilots were talking about Foo Fighters, others would interpret ambiguous visuals through that lens. It sounds reasonable until you examine the reports. The best documented sightings involved multiple crew members on the same aircraft, all reporting the same object simultaneously. Formation pilots in separate aircraft making independent identical reports. And crucially, radar. Ground radar stations independently tracked the same objects pilots were visually observing. Radar does not hallucinate. Radar does not suffer combat stress. The radar corroboration destroys this theory completely. Theory 5, extraterrestrial craft, the theory most associated with Foo Fighters, that these were craft of non-human origin. Intelligently designed vehicles observing the most destructive conflict in human history, from a position of technological superiority, so complete they had nothing to fear from either side. Here is what this theory has going for it. The behavioral profile described across hundreds of accounts does not match any known human technology from any era. Instantaneous acceleration. Instantaneous stop. Silent operation. No propulsion signature. Responsive behavior. Even today, no human aircraft can do what these objects were described doing. The weakness is the absence of physical evidence. No recovered craft, no material samples. The accounts are entirely observational. But the honest acknowledgement at the core of this hypothesis is this. The observed behavior exceeds the known capabilities of any human technology past or present. That gap has never been closed. 8 decades later, it remains genuinely open. Where all 5 theories leave us is this. Each one fails to fully close the door. Something real was there. Something the world's most powerful militaries could neither identify nor explain. And not one of them wanted to admit that. Science does not accept mystery as a final answer. It treats mystery as a starting point. Ball lightning is the most credible conventional explanation. It is real and has been photographed. In 2014, Chinese scientists captured it on spectrographic video for the first time. It glowed, moved horizontally for about 1.6 seconds, then vanished. The wartime electrical environment over Europe was extraordinary in ways that could plausibly increase the frequency of such phenomena. Ball lightning almost certainly accounts for a meaningful portion of Foo Fighter sightings, but it hits its wall immediately. Ball lightning does not follow aircraft. The Chinese sample moved for 1.6 seconds in a straight line. It did not pursue a B-29 for several minutes or mirror directional changes. Atmospheric plasma follows the path of least electrical resistance. It cannot accelerate when chased. It cannot stop dead while an aircraft continues moving. Plasma vortex theory, developed by British scientist Terence Meaden, offers a more sophisticated framework. Rotating columns of ionized air can form, produce light, and move in unusual ways. A plasma vortex interacting with an aircraft's wake could theoretically appear to follow it. Real physics, published in peer-reviewed journals. But it still cannot explain instantaneous acceleration from stationary or objects appearing ahead of aircraft rather than behind them. One dimension that gets too little attention is electromagnetic interference. Multiple pilots reported compass needles spinning, radio disruption, and engine irregularities during encounters. A spinning compass is not a psychological event. It has a physical cause. Radio interference is measurable. Engine irregularities suggest an external physical influence on aircraft systems. These reports are the most concrete physical evidence in the entire record. Something was generating a significant electromagnetic field, strong enough to affect aircraft instruments. Stronger than typical atmospheric electrical phenomena produce. Modern physics, when confronted honestly with the full behavioral profile of the most credible accounts, reaches this conclusion. The combination of instantaneous acceleration, silent operation, no propulsion signature, and responsive behavior does not match any known natural phenomenon or any known human technology. Physicists who engage seriously with this evidence say the movement profiles described would require either propulsion operating on principles currently unknown to mainstream physics or some form of interaction with the physical world that current models do not account for. That is not speculation. That is the honest scientific position. The behavioral signature has appeared not just in 1944, but repeatedly in credible military accounts for 8 decades since. Same characteristics, different observers, different technology. Science recognizes that kind of repetition as evidence of a consistent, real underlying cause. Something real was producing these observations. Conventional explanations account for part of the record. The full explanation remains unknown. And the space between what science can explain and what was observed is exactly the space governments have worked very hard to keep the public from examining. Governments lie. That is documented historical fact across thousands of declassified files and congressional records. They lie when the truth creates panic, threatens security, exposes their ignorance, or involves something they cannot control. The Foo Fighter story hits all 4 reasons simultaneously. What makes this cover-up compelling is that it is built on real documents, signed by real officials. Sitting in classified archives for decades before freedom of information laws pulled them into the light. The U.S. military's strategy of silence, the approach was deliberate. Acknowledge nothing publicly, investigate in secret, classify everything. During the war, pilots who filed Foo Fighter reports were told to treat the matter as classified. The official explanation given was atmospheric phenomena or enemy psychological operations. Neither held up, but in wartime nobody argues with operational security. The silence did not end when the war did. That is the tell. Wartime secrecy ends with the war. This did not. The motivation was never purely about protecting operations. It was about something else. In 1947, the U.S. military established Project Sign. First official UFO investigation, classified, not publicly acknowledged. Its analysts concluded a significant percentage of sightings could not be explained by any known natural or man-made phenomenon. That conclusion was never released to the public. Project Sign was dissolved and replaced by Project Grudge in 1949. Where Project Sign investigated genuinely, Project Grudge was a public relations exercise. Its mandate was to debunk UFO reports and reduce public interest. Its conclusions were predetermined. The objective was making the phenomenon disappear from public consciousness. The classified documents' freedom of information, requests over subsequent decades produced fragments that told a very different story from the official one. Files from the Joint Intelligence Committee showed Foo Fighter reports were passed all the way to the level of the Joint Chiefs. This was not being handled quietly at squadron level. Internal documents used phrases like unknown origin, no conventional explanation identified, and performance characteristics inconsistent with known aircraft. Public statements simultaneously described the sightings as misidentified natural phenomena. The gap between what officials said publicly and what they wrote internally is damning. One partially declassified 1945 document referred specifically to craft displaying performance capabilities beyond current Allied or known Axis technology. Stamped top secret. Sitting in an archive for over 40 years. A 1944-1945 assessment specifically examined whether Foo Fighters were German remote-controlled devices. It concluded they were not. It then listed three alternative categories: natural phenomena, unknown Allied program, unknown origin. It identified unknown origin as most consistent with the full body of available evidence. Military intelligence analysts in 1945 concluded the most likely explanation was unknown origin. The public was told there was nothing to investigate. British intelligence and the D-notice system. Britain used D-notices to suppress this information. Formal requests to news editors not to publish information that could compromise national security. Compliance was essentially universal. Journalists with tip-offs were quietly asked not to publish. Some were told publication would violate the Official Secrets Act. One released British intelligence summary from 1945 noted that RAF aircrew reports had reached a frequency that made dismissal as misidentification no longer tenable as a complete explanation. It recommended continued classified investigation against any public acknowledgement and specifically cited the risk of public alarm if the full scope of sightings became widely known. Public alarm. That phrase appears in multiple documents from multiple countries. The governments were not hiding what these things were. They were hiding their own ignorance. Because admitting they could not explain something in their own airspace was terrifying to institutions that needed public confidence to function. Operation Paperclip. After the war, America secretly recruited over 1,600 German scientists and engineers. Most discussion focuses on rocket scientists like Wernher von Braun. Less discussed is this: several individuals brought over had knowledge related to German research into unusual aerial phenomena. When debriefed by American intelligence, the publicly available portions covered rocket technology. The portions touching on unexplained aerial phenomena were redacted, large sections blacked out. The pattern of what is withheld strongly suggests those sections relate to German knowledge of the Foo Fighter phenomenon. What those German scientists told American intelligence has never been made public. 80 years later, long after any conceivable strategic sensitivity expired, still classified. Why the cover UP never fully ended. The institutional culture of silence was established during World War II, formalized through Project Grudge, embedded deeply in military intelligence culture. And institutional cultures resist change even when the original reasons for them expired long ago. Documents exist, assessments exist, analyses exist. Still in classified archives or bureaucratic categories beyond the reach of standard freedom of information requests. The question worth asking is not just what those files contain. It is why 80 years later someone still does not want you to read them. The Foo Fighters did not retire when the war ended. The phenomenon kept appearing. Different skies, different eras. Different pilots flying different aircraft for different militaries. And every single time the behavioral signature was the same. Same shape, same silence, same impossible movement. Same official denial. In 1946, 1 year after the war, a wave of unidentified aerial phenomena swept across Scandinavia. Hundreds of reports from Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Denmark. The Swedish military launched a formal investigation, producing over 1,000 documented reports. Their assessment concluded a significant number could not be attributed to any known aircraft, natural phenomenon, or misidentification. American intelligence monitored the Swedish investigation closely. Those reports were classified. In 1947, Kenneth Arnold reported 9 disc-shaped objects near Mount Rainier in Washington state. His description gave birth to the term flying saucers. His public report opened a floodgate. Military personnel who had been keeping quiet about wartime sightings began talking. The evidence building since 1944 suddenly threatened to become a public conversation that could not be controlled. The military's response was Project Sign, then Project Grudge, then Project Blue Book. Each successive program progressively less interested in genuine investigation and more focused on managing the public narrative. Through the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, military pilots from multiple nations kept reporting encounters. Korea war pilots flying F-86 Sabres reported spherical silent objects that outperformed their jets completely. No intercept succeeded. Vietnam-era pilots reported similar encounters. The aircraft had advanced enormously. The objects had not. That consistency across technological eras is scientifically significant. Human-built experimental aircraft show a technology curve, getting incrementally more capable over time. The historical record shows objects performing at a level that remained consistently beyond the most advanced human aviation technology of every era doing the observing. That pattern does not fit any human development program. In November 2004, the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group was conducting training exercises approximately 100 miles southwest of San Diego. For several days, the USS Princeton's radar had been tracking anomalous objects, appearing at 80,000 feet, then dropping to just above sea level in seconds. The physics of drag make that impossible for any conventional aircraft. Commander David Fravor, a Navy fighter pilot with over 16 years' experience, was launched to investigate. He described seeing a white elongated tic-tac-shaped object approximately 40 feet long hovering just above the ocean. No wings, no visible propulsion, no markings, just hovering silently. He descended toward it. The object immediately mirrored his movements. When he descended, it ascended. When he banked, it responded. That responsive mirroring behavior is identical to what World War II pilots described 60 years earlier. Fravor tried to close distance. The object accelerated away instantly, from a hover to extraordinary speed in less than a second, and reappeared on radar approximately 60 miles away almost instantaneously. The encounter was captured on his FLIR targeting pod. The tic-tac video was declassified and released by the Pentagon in 2020. Fravor states clearly and consistently that what he encountered was beyond anything in the U.S. military's known inventory. His description reads like a direct continuation of the 415th Night Fighter Squadron accounts from 1944. Same phenomenon, same behavioral profile, 60 years apart. In June 2021, the United States government officially acknowledged in a publicly released report that unidentified aerial phenomena were real, were being observed by military personnel, and could not be explained by any known conventional technology. Of 144 UAP reports examined, exactly one was explained. The remaining 143 were unresolved. The behavioral characteristics noted in that report are strikingly familiar. Instantaneous acceleration. No discernible means of propulsion. Stationary positions against strong winds, detected by multiple independent sensors simultaneously. Every one of those characteristics appears in World War II Foo Fighter accounts word for word 80 years later. In July 2023, former intelligence officer David Grush testified under oath before Congress that the U.S. government was in possession of non-human craft and biological materials recovered from crash sites, concealed for decades through an illegal compartmentalized program. The Pentagon denied it. Congress demanded access to the programs described. That access was resisted. The pattern of institutional resistance that began with the first Foo Fighter reports in 1944 was playing out in real time before a congressional committee in 2023. WW2 pilots described objects that were spherical or elongated, silent, capable of instantaneous acceleration and deceleration, able to hover without visible propulsion, apparently responsive to aircraft around them. Navy pilots in 2004 described the same things. Whatever is producing this phenomenon has been operating in human airspace for at least 80 years. Through the most destructive war in history, through the nuclear age, through the space age, through the digital revolution, consistently beyond reach, consistently beyond explanation. Something is there, it has always been there, and we still do not know what it is, we still do not have the full answer, not because it does not exist, but because significant parts of it are sitting in classified archives, held by institutions that have spent 80 years perfecting the art of saying nothing while appearing to say something. What we know for certain, hundreds of trained military personnel from multiple nations observed unidentified aerial objects during World War II. Formal military records, stamped, signed. Not anecdotal. Those objects displayed behavioral characteristics that military intelligence analysts at the time concluded could not be explained by any known technology. Those assessments survive in partially declassified form. The U.S. military conducted classified investigations during and after the war. Project Sign found things they were not prepared to share. Project Grudge was designed to make the public stop asking questions. That is documented fact. Information was actively withheld. Official public statements directly contradicted what internal classified documents said. The USS Nimitz encounter is documented by multiple witnesses, censored data, and Pentagon-released video. The 2021 ODNI report officially acknowledges 143 out of 144 military UAP reports remain unexplained. Elements of the documentation remain classified today. These are documented facts established through official government documents, congressional records, and sworn testimony. What remains hidden, the Operation Paperclip debrief redactions, are a clear signal. Why would portions of 80-year-old scientist conversations still require classified protection? What could possibly remain sensitive after 8 decades? The released wartime intelligence fragments reference documents that have never appeared in any Freedom of Information release. Internal citations pointing to studies that are simply not in any publicly available archive. These were not lost. Government archives do not misplace documents of this classification level. They are withheld deliberately. Congress has attempted to access classified programs referenced in recent testimony. Those attempts have been resisted. Elected representatives are being told there are things related to this subject they are not permitted to know. That resistance in a democratic system is its own statement. The ROBERTSON panel. What you were promised at the beginning of this video, we promised you a detail buried inside a declassified government file that changes the entire story. Here it is. In 1952, the CIA assembled a classified study called the Robertson Panel. Formed in response to a dramatic wave of UFO sightings over Washington, D.C., tracked on radar, witnessed by multiple credible observers, scientists and intelligence officials. Its stated purpose was to assess the national security implications of UFO reports. The panel's classified findings, eventually declassified decades later, contain something that has never received the attention it deserves. The Robertson panel explicitly recommended a program of public debunking, not because it concluded UFOs were not real, but because the volume of public interest was clogging military communication channels. People reporting sightings were creating noise that could interfere with detecting real threats, specifically Soviet aircraft during the Cold War. The panel recommended a coordinated campaign to reduce public interest in UFO sightings, working with media organizations to discourage coverage. Using scientists and entertainers to shape public perception of the subject as not credible. This was not a scientific conclusion. It was an administrative convenience decision. And that recommendation was implemented. The debunking culture surrounding this subject for the last 70 years was not organic. Not the natural result of scientific investigation concluding the phenomenon was unreal. It was the result of a deliberate 1952 CIA policy decision by a panel that never concluded these things were not real. It concluded that public interest in them was creating paperwork problems. The stigma, the ridicule, the career consequences for military personnel who spoke too openly. All of it traces back not to evidence but to an administrative CIA recommendation from 1952. The cover-up was never built on knowledge. It was built on convenience. That single fact changes the entire frame of this story. The dismissal of this phenomenon for 7 decades was never driven by evidence. It was driven by institutional self-interest. And institutional self-interest, once established as policy, outlasts everything, including the truth. Every pilot who filed a Foo Fighter report in 1944 and was told to stay quiet deserved better. Every veteran who carried that memory without ever receiving an honest official response deserved better. And the public, systematically misled for 8 decades through a deliberate, coordinated policy, is owed the full truth, not as a favor, as an obligation 80 years overdue. We started in a cockpit over wartime Germany, a pilot, a glowing light off his wing, a moment of confusion from a man trained to understand everything he saw in the sky. That moment is a thread that runs all the way to the world we are living in today. We met the pilots who had the courage to report what they saw even when their commanders wanted them silent. We examined every theory and found none of them fully closes the door. We followed the science to where it honestly runs out. We traced a cover-up built not on knowledge but on convenience. We drew a direct line from the Rhine Valley in 1944 to the California coast in 2004 and found the same phenomenon described in the same language 8 decades apart. And we revealed the Robertson Panel, the CIA document that exposed what the culture of dismissal actually was, not science, policy, administrative self-interest dressed up as investigation. The phenomenon was real, the governments knew it, the cover-up was deliberate, the phenomenon never stopped, the classified archives still exist, the full truth has never been told. Every one of those statements is supported by documents, sworn testimony, and official government acknowledgement. The wall is cracking. Every declassified document is a crack. Every congressional hearing is a crack. Every credible witness who speaks on the record is a crack. Walls built on convenience rather than truth are ultimately unstable. The men of the 415th Night Fighter Squadron never got their answers. They deserved them. So do we. Now we want to hear from you. What do you think the Foo Fighters actually were? Leave your answer in the comments. We read every single one. The most thoughtful get featured in our follow-up videos. If this video gave you something to think about, hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications. This channel exists for exactly this kind of story. The documented, the hidden, the historically significant, the things powerful institutions would prefer you never looked at too closely. Our next video goes into the classified programs and decisions made in the years immediately after the war. The ones that shaped the world you are living in today. You will not want to miss it. Subscribe, turn on notifications, share this with someone who thinks they know the full story of World War II, because now you know they do not, and neither did any of us until today.